Why do we have so many people who are financially illiterate? Let's find out what that means, why it exists, and what we are doing about it next on Lakeshore Focus.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.
Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. There are so many people today who don't know how to manage their money. They really don't know how to navigate the American economic system. With large piles of debt increasing, expensive bankruptcies, and loss of opportunities, it is not surprising that we have such a large number of people who are struggling to economically exist. On today's show, we are going to talk about financial and economic literacy and find out what we are doing to combat this problem. With us are Gina Fezler, who is the Assistant Vice President with First Financial Bank, and Tony Credit, who is the President and founder of the Academic and Professional Success Foundation. TAPS. That sounds like it's the end of something you're going to play taps.
Yeah, exactly. The end of financial literacy, hopefully. Right.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Okay. Let's help for the viewers try to define what we talk about in terms of financial illiteracy or literacy, whichever way you want to spin it. Gina, how do you define that?
You know, I think, Keith, there are several definitions of financial illiteracy. The first thing as a banker that comes to mind for me is the population of unbanked people that still remain out in our population. So for me, that is probably the number one root of it. But I think ultimately it's generational, and we can talk about how others define it. Maybe Tony has some insight to share, but that's my number one thought.
You know, I always find that interesting. Yeah. The person who runs to the bank, cashes their check, and then they've got this big wad of cash, and they pay everything with cash. Yeah. So why is that so important? Why is that so important, particularly to a banker, that people have a bank account?
Well, I think the basics of personal finance or financial literacy really is the common denominator that all of us kind of need to live by, and that's the source of a bank. How do we cash our checks? How do we make the bank work for us? How do we pay our bills? How do we navigate through life with minimizing fees and making the most of the income that we're generating?
I never really thought about that before until you really talked about it, about the huge disadvantage people have. I know today electronically you can't pay anything if you don't have a bank account. So how are you doing cash? And you know, it's just interesting. How do you define illiteracy financially?
Financial illiteracy is these students. Well, I teach at several colleges as well, and a lot of students just don't understand the banking system itself, how important it is to have a savings account, how important it is to have a checking account, and how their credit scores matter, right?
You can hardly do anything today without a credit score.
Oh yeah, they don't even. Some of them, I have to teach them that, you know, if you, even getting a job nowadays, the employer may check your credit score, right? And so my students are like, well, how do I establish credit? So we have to teach them how to establish credit and how to avoid going into debt. So financial illiteracy involves so many different things, and they don't understand how it impacts their lives.
And we talk about financial literacy, but some of this is kind of economic illiteracy too, just not understanding how the system works. It's just even the simple concept of people work, they get paid for a job, that company has to make money, they have to make a profit, you know, just how the money flows and all. What are the kind of really common problems do you see with people who just are kind of lost in the system?
You know, I think, Keith, it's unfortunate, but you run into folks both young and who've been in the workforce for some time. And I think the challenge is that some of them just don't know any of it. They don't know the basics of, like you said, the economic system, you know, the importance of credit and understanding how that comes into play for your life. And just the basics of savings, of budgeting, of maintaining a lifestyle, and how their finances tie into their overall life success.
I don't You know, for people who are literate, they probably just don't have a concept of this. I mean, if you really think about the person who walks in and says, I want to buy a car.
Right.
And they said, oh, I can loan you the money. It's 16%. But you may have no reference point at all that that's a high rate or a low rate. You just know, well, I assume they give everybody 16%.
Right.
So what else do you see as an impact of this?
Well, I say one of the biggest impacts is that a lot of the students that I deal with, their mom and dad had always done it for them, right? So they have no clue because mom and dad had always provided the bank accounts and taken care of everything. And so they were just basically taken care of. And so they have no clue based upon their family situation. And then in some families going further, the parents didn't even know. They never established credit.
How about the parents who they can't teach it if they don't know it.
They don't trust banks. A lot of parents don't trust banks. And so
you're the problem, Gina. It's the banks that are the problem.
Yeah.
You know, and it would appear that way. I mean, I think it's an easy source to blame to say, you know, the banks haven't helped me become financially literate. But I think, you know, referencing back to what Tony said, it starts at home, it starts at school, it starts with family focus and family value and understanding that, you know, to be successful in life, you need the personal financial success as well.
You know, I didn't probably realize this maybe till I got older, the wisdom of and how some of the other people do it too with our kids. You know, 5 jars. This is you take take $1 and some of it goes into this for spending. Some goes for savings. This is for college. This is for something big you want to buy. And just that little system of jars and pennies taught them that you manage money.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's just kind of, the audience probably at this point like, okay, we understand what we got a banker on here, but even why did we pick you from the bank, and who in the world are you anyway besides somebody who teaches? So why are you both so interested in this issue?
Okay, so I'm interested in financial literacy for a couple of reasons. You know, being a banker, being very community focused, I felt like it's my duty to make sure that we start the charge of financial literacy training to our youth, that we start with the next generation. Maybe we can't go out there and fix everybody in the current working generation, but what can we do to make the future a more financially stable and successful place? So that would be one reason at my banking community duty. The second reason that is that because I'm involved in Junior Achievement, which is an organization that its whole mission is to make sure that our youth is prepared for financial and work readiness success in their lives. So I've taken it one step further, Keith, and joined the board at Junior Achievement Northwest Indiana to kind of solidify this mission of educating our youth.
We'll talk a little bit more about Junior Achievement as one of the potential solutions to this, but why are you so involved in this? Why is this an important issue for you?
It motivated me because, you know, I'm also a lawyer. When I graduated law school, you know, when I was in law school, my friends and I, we really didn't understand student loan debt.
So you borrowed a lot.
So we borrowed money for law school. We didn't understand. They were just like, you know, borrow money to go to school, we'll pay it back, and everything will be fine. And then you get out of school and you realize, man, that's a lot to pay back, right? Then you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car, you want to have kids, and you're like, wow, I was financially illiterate for quite some time, right? Even though my family had, you know, we did the savings account things and checking accounts, I had no clue about debt, right? And so student loan debt became a big issue for me, and understanding that how it impacted my life and how it impacts others. And then as I started teaching college at Ivy Tech Community College and the College of Court Reporting at Hobart, I saw so many students accumulating so much student loan debt. And I was telling, you guys don't have any idea what you're doing. Don't do that, right? And so I felt driven to start my foundation to teach them how to succeed academically, but also professionally. And part of that was how to handle your finances.
You know, I know for one aspect too, in terms of the workforce, and particularly from a bank, but any concerned community citizen, here's our employers constantly complain about the quality of people who walk through the door who don't know how to manage money, to do any of this. And you're going to put them at the cash register. You're going to put them handling inventory. You're going to put them in a position, and they can't even fill out the application. Or, you know, that's a huge impact on employers. You're involved with the Chamber of Commerce, so what do employers say about these people coming through the door that are financially illiterate?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely dead on, Keith. I think that there's a lot of complaints about the talent pool within our region, and I think it's not just a regional issue, but it's a nationwide issue for us. And I think a lot of it stems from not understanding general economics. Again, while they're young, and understanding, back to what Tony said, what happens, after college. How financial responsibility is so easily volatile, and a couple of false moves can really put you out of the marketplace for a job, for getting loans for vehicles or homes, or even continuing education. And think about the impact that then stems to their children and the family that they're responsible for. So
I know when I've hired people, if I can pry it out of people, I actually try to find out kind of their debt load, because I'm thinking that debt load is having a direct impact on their decision making.
Oh yeah.
So how does that affect that decision making?
When you, for example, if you're going to go take the bar exam, right? They look at how much student loan debt you have, and if you have too much debt, sometimes they will not let you take the bar exam.
Wow.
Because they're afraid that you're going to go out and gouge your clients in order to make money. You're going to do things that are unethical because you have so much student loan debt. In medical schools, they're all concerned about the amount of student loan debt that employees have. I mean, think about it. If you have an employee, potential employee, one with $200,000 worth of student loan debt, and another one only has 35 or 40 because they went to community college, which one's going to be a little bit more stable financially in that job, right?
For me, I found if somebody's got a lot of debt, I'm thinking, as soon as somebody offers you a quarter more, you're going to leave me and go work for somebody else, because you think that's how you kind of live on.
Right.
Hey, I got $100 in my hand. Next week I can have 105. So
it causes instability in the workplace. That's what we discovered in our, is that a lot of the students are changing jobs so often. My mom, and she worked at a company at a bank for 35 years, right? She just stayed with that bank. And now with the student loan debt issue, students are jumping from job to job every time they get a raise, and that impacts the credit score as well, right?
Sure.
It has a huge impact.
So it's, I just find this whole thing kind of fascinating, the impact that it's really having. But now we're trying to do some other things. I asked one of my employees today, kind of like, wait a second, I thought high school has a class in senior year in government and economics. Now, she gave me an interesting answer. I said, what do they cover in economics? I'm just curious. You haven't been out of high school real long, a few years, but
Thanks.
But I'm way past you. So do you remember taking that class? Or
You
do
know,
you even know what they cover in that class?
No, I was not privy to any kind of real economics or personal finance type of courses while I was in high school. I think a majority of it came from me just having an interest in it and asking my parents to explain how all of this works. And so, I was lucky enough to have parents that understood and were able to, put a savings plan and a budget in place for our family and set me up for success for the future. But I think, again, you've hit it right on the head. There is a lack of those courses and that teaching to the most impactful group of students, and that would be our graduating high school seniors.
Yeah. Are you aware of what they cover in those classes?
Oh no, I'm not aware of what they cover at all. Matter of fact, I try to go to high schools and say we need to teach our students to succeed academically, but also professionally, meaning that they need to understand that what student loan debt is, and we need to teach them financial literacy. And so it's what we do at Junior Achievement is that we want to get into the schools and do that. And it's difficult because the schools are so busy trying to teach them to pass the tests.
Right.
You got to get the 4-star status from the state of Indiana. So it's really difficult for the teachers to do what they want to do.
Well, I know JAs really has an impact, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But so I want to tell you what the answer was from the student. I said, so what did you learn in the high school economics class? And she said, they taught us a lot about the stock market and how stocks work. And I thought, what percentage of people today in America trade? I mean, really buy stock and trade and need to know how that exactly works. In fact, even people with money get into a mutual fund. They don't even buy stocks. But she said, we talked about that every week. I'm like, what else did you talk about? She said, well, we talked about banking. And I said, oh, okay, and this is good. She goes, kind of why banks exist and the history of banks. And I'm like, well, what does that have to do with filling out a credit application or functioning? So I thought, they're teaching this high-level stuff that kind of educational, but it has no practical
Yeah.
application. Right. So JA offers that. So for the people who don't know, junior achievement, what is junior achievement to you, Gina?
Well, junior achievement to me is, well, I guess I'll start a little bit back. When I was in grade school, I had some bouts of junior achievement kind of thrown into our curriculum, but it was never really consistent or stable. And so I think junior achievement has a curriculum right now from kindergarten all the way through college years. And so if a school system can consistently involve junior achievement programs into their curriculum, junior achievement's building a base of financial and work readiness programs that are helping students become successful from the time that they're 5 all the way up until they're graduating college. So to me, junior achievement is a really great answer to what we're lacking currently in our school curriculum.
What's your elevator speech for junior achievement?
Well, it's we're trying to close the gap between the real world and school. Because there is a huge gap, just like you talked about. You're in school, you're learning this high-level stuff, but the reality is way down here. And so, where do you close that gap? And that's what junior achievement is about. So when I didn't know about junior achievement when I was growing up. I learned about it a few months ago, and I was like blown away. It's like there's somebody out there who's passionate about the same thing that I'm passionate about at my foundation. And so I met with our local representative, got together, and now I'm on the board. And we're trying to close that gap between.
When they see talent, they grab it. They do. They see the potential of a zealot for the cause.
Right.
So, I strongly believe in junior achievement. I chaired this region for 5 years, so so it's real important to me. What does a volunteer? Volunteers are people like you, right? It's not part of your job necessarily. You just volunteer your time to go into the school. Explain how. Give an example of one of the classes you taught and kind of what you were teaching.
Sure. I've been
worked.
volunteering with Junior Achievement over the last 4 years here in Northwest Indiana, and I've taught anything from grade school children, 3rd grade, all the way up into high school. And so I can tell you my favorite experience with Junior Achievement kind of stems not so much from financial literacy standpoint, but from things that are work readiness and just gearing kids for the next phase of their life. So I avidly volunteer at Maryville High School at least twice a year, and they have a great program that is all about work readiness and how I can explain to them my passion of being a banker, being community focused, and really help kids decide what their path is as they move forward and think about pursuing an education and what their field is going to be. We talk about things that are relevant, like what types of jobs are going to be here in 5 years, in 10 years, and in 20 years, so that when they think about their course of study, they really kind of think about, how am I going to prepare myself for the future and be able to give back and be successful.
It's one of my favorites too is, I think, similar, maybe 3rd grade level or something, that it's like, okay, here's a town. People, here's the fire station, here's a school, here's this, people work in these places. Those are called jobs. They get paid to do that. I'm thinking, well, that's just, again, common sense, but I'm like, if you've never heard those concepts, you don't really understand. And I've seen those people come in where you hire them and they go, so when do I get paid? It's like they don't even have a concept of how that works.
Yeah.
What has it meant for you, junior achievement?
Well, Keith, it's meant helping people learn things that they never would have known without junior achievement coming into the classroom. I'll give you an example. At Maryville High School, one of the things that I like to do is teach them about what college major should you choose, because that plays a huge role in your financial abilities and financial literacy. Are you choosing a college major that's growing in the 21st century or declining? And so one of my very first classes, we've talked about that. We're like, well, and there's a class full of seniors. What are you thinking about? And a lot of my students had chosen career fields or potential college majors such as criminal justice, right? And last time I checked, there are no criminal justice jobs running around here in Northwest Indiana, right? So I'm like, you probably
What are you
need
gonna
to
do with that?
Yeah, what are you gonna do with that? You need to rethink your college major, because if you get out there and you go to school for 4 or 5 years and you have this amount of debt and your income is non-existent, then you don't have any financial security. And so a lot of the students that I talked to had already chosen criminal justice as a major. Out of a class of about 20, probably 10 had chosen as a major. And there are no jobs available in this area.
So part of this is just understanding our economy a little bit.
Yeah.
The simple concept of where are the jobs of the future.
Right.
I mean, how do you convey that? But I love how this is, JA breaks this into, I mean, there's kind of stuff for grade school and middle school and high school level. Who are the other volunteers that do this?
That's a great question. I think, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not qualified to volunteer for junior achievement. I don't know anything about financial literacy or, work readiness. But I think people discredit themselves. Our volunteer base is everyone. It's stay-at-home moms. It's, school teachers who, this is outside of their comfort zone of teaching. This is business professionals. This is community leaders. This is, police officers. This is anybody who cares about the future of our youth and about making our generation, the next generation, even better than this one.
Yeah.
My qualifications usually I say, do you have a checking account? Have you ever applied for a job? Are you a good employee? Do you know do you get a paycheck and what do you do with it? I said, you got the qualifications because you already know this stuff.
Do you care about kids? Do you care about the future of kids? I mean, that's one of the big things is that you gotta have some compassion, some empathy for our children. So if you care about kids, come and volunteer. I mean, because we teach them and the materials are there. All you gotta do is basically read it and pass it out. It's not really labor intensive. It's like I have to go back to school to learn it.
Right.
So we're down to about a minute, but I know the banks are trying to do some of this too. You go into some of the schools and just do some concepts, right?
Absolutely. Even prior or outside of JA's scope, a lot of times, being involved through the chamber and the community, I find that I'm asked to do a lot of financial literacy teaching. So I utilize JA, of course, whenever I can, and when I can't, then it's typically through the American Banker Association. There's all kinds of materials through many organizations out there that allow you to go out and like Tony said, just teach programs.
So just a quick pitch, we're down to the last second, to why somebody should volunteer.
You should volunteer if you care. And plus, it's a great way to help our community, right? And it doesn't take a lot of time at all. And we'll teach you everything you need to know.
Like an hour a week sometimes.
Like an hour a week.
What's your pitch? Why should somebody jump in there and try to help other people with literacy?
I think, again, it's important that we have financial literacy, a strong base for our children so that our next generation can make this an absolutely wonderful place to live and be.
Well, thank you both for not only being here, but for volunteering for junior achievement and really doing all kinds of good things for young people and older people who need this literacy, need this education. Thanks for being here on the show.
Thank you.
I entitled my closing remarks, Sense and Sense Ability. When I hear about the low level of financial and economic literacy that exists within our population, I'm shocked. How do people not know how to conduct business at a bank? People don't know how to fill out a job application, and they put what on it? You can't write a check. You don't know what a savings account is. You have no idea why it's important for a business to make a profit. I thought this stuff was just common sense. It's not. You have to be taught it or have it explained to you. When your school doesn't have it in the curriculum, your parents are clueless, and you have no realization why you should know this stuff, your financial literacy remains at 0. With such a low score and no sense of its importance and no sense in your pocket, your ability is handicapped in employment and day-to-day living. It means you have little access to cash and no ability to get a legitimate loan. If you do have some credit, you are paying high interest rates. With no savings or money to invest, you make nothing extra. Most likely, you are spending more than you should and are paying higher prices than others. You can't buy a home, perhaps not a car. Employment opportunities do not appear due to your credit score, indebtedness, or perceived risk with handling money. You do not understand what goes on in this complex global marketplace and become a disgruntled or difficult employee. And it just gets worse with time. How do we fix this? Well, my suggestion is for each of us to play a part in the financial and economic education of those who struggle with this deficiency. I'm assuming that the vast majority of our viewers are financially literate. If you're not, I applaud you for watching public television because that means you recognize your need to learn and be inspired. If you are knowledgeable, take the time to give helpful explanations to people who appear to not have the necessary information. Better yet, volunteer with Junior Achievement or any other opportunity where you can help people understand how to navigate the complex world of finance, work, and consumerism. We've put some contact information on the screen for you. Write it down. More importantly, follow up and volunteer to help others become financially literate and successful in life. We hope that our show enlightened and challenged you in some way. If you have thoughts and comments about today's broadcast or any other show you may have watched from the website, send them to our email address on the screen. You can also access our past shows from the website. If you didn't catch information posted on the screen during any show, you can watch it again online by fast-forwarding to a specific place in the show. That tip may help you out. Be sure and join us again next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.